Thanks, Johnny. Well, good morning, church. We're going to do something quite different this morning, something really different. So put your brain belts on, because this morning we're doing science. This is going to be quite different to what you're used to in church, so buckle up. I want to start with a question. What do you think is the most significant miracle recorded in Scripture? Creation. Yeah, I mean, some people say resurrection, some people like the water into wine thing, but yeah, creation, right? How about the very first sentence in all of Scripture? In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. You know, if this is true, anything else is possible. Raising from the dead, immaculate conception, I mean, all the other miracles recorded in Scripture make sense if this is true. But what's really interesting is that the beginning, when everything came into existence, it points to the existence of God in such profound ways that we want to look at tonight. And we're talking here about the Big Bang. Now, before any young earth creationists start throwing rotten fruit at me, when I'm talking about the Big Bang, I'm simply talking about the creation event itself, the time when all matter, energy, space, and time came into existence. This is a point in time in the distant past that science now admits happened, that there was a creation event, there was a time when everything came into existence, and it's only a recent discovery. It was actually right up until the 1960s. Scientists and philosophers thought the universe was eternal. So the Big Bang Theory is actually only a recent discovery, but it's one that science now has to admit that there was a beginning to the universe. So what are some of the lines of evidence that point to the fact that there was a beginning? There's three key lines of evidence. The first is the expanding universe, like an expanding balloon. Everywhere we look, the stars that are distant from us are moving away from us. And the further away those stars are, the faster they're moving away, suggesting everything is moving away from everything else. Now, it doesn't mean that we're at the center of the universe, just because we see everything moving away from us. Because in the case of the expanding balloon, you could pick any dot on that balloon, and as you expand the balloon, every other dot on the balloon is moving away from that dot. And in fact, the further away the other dot is, the faster it's moving away from the dot you've chosen. So it doesn't necessarily mean we're at the center of the universe. It's just that everything is moving away from everything else. And then you wind time back, and you have a time when everything was infinitely dense, and that is the creation event, when everything started infinitely dense. So that's one line of evidence. The next line of evidence is what we call the cosmic background radiation. This is when we look back in time by looking at the furthest distances of the universe, and we see this heat signature that points to an extremely hot, extremely energetic beginning of the universe. And again, everywhere we look, in every direction, we see this signature of a very, 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 very hot, very energetic beginning. And then the third line of evidence, it's a little bit complicated. Entropy, second law of thermodynamics, basically means that everything is running out of usable energy. So just like your phone, the battery's running flat in the universe. And why does that point to a beginning? Because if the universe has always existed, then we would have already run out of all the usable energy. It's kind of like the fact that your phone still has a charge, but it's running out, suggests that there was a time when it was at 100%, and that 100%, when all of the energy in the universe was actually available, was at that very first moment. Now everything's running out slowly, running down, and eventually the universe will actually die. We'll suffer from what we call universal heat death, where all the possible usable energy in the universe has dissipated and is gone. So we see the universe expanding, we see the afterglow of a very energetic beginning, and we see that the universe is running out of energy, suggesting there was a time when all that energy was available. So we come to a simple conclusion that science acknowledges now. The universe came into existence. That's our first fact. Our second fact is kind of self-evident, and that is everything that comes into existence has a cause, leading us to the conclusion that the universe itself must have a cause. And this morning, I want to examine the question, what is that cause? What is that cause? And what does it have to be able to do? Spoiler alert, it's not Jacinda Ardern. We're going to use the idea of cause and effect. And this is something that we use in our reasoning all the time. We're constantly looking at an effect and reasoning backwards to a cause. So you walk into the kitchen in the morning and there's spilt milk. There's an effect. Then you want to ask yourself, well, what caused the spilt milk? And you start to look for evidence to figure that out. You walk into the next room and there's a broken window. And there's the effect, broken window. You ask the question, why is the window broken? There's a cricket ball on the floor and there's kids outside playing cricket, right? And so you come to the conclusion that you've got a clumsy family that doesn't clean up after themselves. Right? So we're using the ability to reason backwards to a cause that explains the effects that we're looking at. And this morning, the effect that we're looking at is the universe coming into existence. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the different things a cause must have in order to be capable of doing that. And so we're going to ask the question, what cause is capable of bringing the universe into effect? Now here's another example for this way that we reason between cause and effect. If you look at this picture and we ask ourselves, what cause is capable of the effect that we're seeing? Now, you guys have already reasoned through this, right? I know you've already got a conclusion in your mind, but what if I suggest to you that the cause of this is war? Because war causes huge damage, right? It's incredibly destructive. Now, war is a possible cause to this, but, there's water everywhere and there's a ship on dry land. War is incredibly destructive, but is war a sufficient cause to this destruction? It's not, is it? So here we have our effect, massive destruction, ships moved onto dry land, and you guys have already come to the conclusion, what is the thing that best explains this? Right, so there's this reasoning back. It's not enough just to suggest a possible cause, war. You've got to ask, is war sufficient? And that's what we're going to do this morning when, actually, this is what science does. This is the work of science. Science will see an exploding star and reason back and say, what best explains this? Using the science of cosmology. We see a pending extinction and we reason back and answer the question, what is causing this pending extinction? Using biology and ecology. We see a chemical reaction and we reason back and say, what best explains this? Using the science of chemistry, right? I was going to tell a joke about sodium, but nah. Get it? Some of you do. I would make another chemistry joke, but all the good ones are gone. Once I told a chemistry joke, there was no reaction. My kids aren't in the room, so I haven't horribly embarrassed them. I know, you get it. No, I was hoping to embarrass my kids. Okay, so the universe coming into existence, what best explains it? What we're going to do is we're going to list the properties that the cause of the universe must have to sufficiently explain the universe coming into existence. So, let's make a start. The first thing the cause of the universe must be is spaceless. Now, by space, I'm not talking about stars and planets. By space, I'm talking about dimensions, right? Height, width, depth. Because there was no height, width, or depth before the Big Bang. Space, dimensions, came into existence at the time of the Big Bang. So the cause of the Big Bang cannot be something with dimensions. It's spaceless. Likewise, the cause of the universe is outside of time. It is timeless. Because, and this is kind of hard to know, but it's well accepted in science, that time itself came into existence at the Big Bang. So there actually was no before the Big Bang. That's suggesting there was a moment of time before the Big Bang. Time itself came into existence. So the cause of the universe isn't in time. It also has to be immaterial, as in it's not made of stuff, because all the stuff came into existence at the time of the Big Bang. matter, energy, space, and time all came into existence, so the cause of the universe is outside of matter, energy, space, and time. By definition, something that is spaceless, timeless, and immaterial, simply by definition, is supernatural. Right? And I don't mean supernatural like spells and ghosts and things. I mean supernatural as an outside of the natural. Right? The natural is matter, energy, space, and time. It is outside of that, therefore it is supernatural, simply by definition. It is also, the cause of the universe is also immensely, unimaginably powerful. Like when you actually start to look at the amount of energy, the amount of matter, and the volume, the actual scale of the universe, both big and small, it's almost beyond comprehension. We've all experienced looking up at the Milky Way, right? When you're away from the city lights, you're on a moonless night, clear sky, and you look up and you're just absolutely awestruck, right? We've all experienced this. How does it make you feel? What does it make you feel? Small. I want to argue that you have no idea how small we should be feeling when we're looking at these stars. Did you know that the naked human eye can only make out like 5,000 individual stars on a very clear night sky? So that means when you're looking up at the Milky Way, which has 100 billion stars in it, you're only seeing 0.00005% of the actual stars that are there. And you're being awestruck by that? Also, when you're looking at a pinprick of light and you're recognizing a star, the distance that you are seeing that light from is almost incomprehensible. And what I want to do now is try and just give you a taste of what those distances are by creating a scale model of our galaxy. So what I have here is some sand, which I've deliberately chosen because these grains are about 1 millimetre across, so that we can work with the scale of 1 millimetre. Okay? So, I don't know if you can see that, but I promise you there is a tiny grain of sand, and that is going to represent the sun. This is our sun. Little old star. Now, the Earth, oh, there it goes. That always happens. Yeah. So just like God, I can just pick up another one. So there we go. Okay, there's our sun. The Earth would be about a handspan away and about the size of a white blood cell. So too small for us to see. So we imagine a white blood cell on my thumb. There's our sun. 1 year it takes this white blood cell to travel around and orbit the sun. That's what 1 year is. So there's a representation now. There's our scale model of our solar system. Now let's look at the closest star to us. The closest visible star, anyway, is Alpha Centauri. It's one of the pointers that points to the Southern Cross. It's the furthest away one. This is the closest star to ours, other than our sun, to us, and it is 4.3 light years away. Well, so what? What does that mean? 4.3? Okay, so it takes 4.3 years for light to reach us. But we can't actually comprehend. I mean, what is a light year? So that's why I wanted to do this. What we're going to do is, here's our sun, here's our Earth. By the way, if we were to do a scale model, you and I would be about the size of an electron on this white blood cell. So you and I are about the size of an electron. Our planet is the size of a white blood cell. There's our sun. Here is Alpha Centauri. Where should I put it in order to get the scale model? What did you reckon? Just outside? Any other guesses? In the CBD? In order to make this a true scale model, I would have to ask David to take this. No, that's right, you don't have to. I'd suggest that David take our grain of sand, hop in his car and drive to Rotorua. 43 kilometres, it's just on the outskirts of Rotorua. And that's the next closest star to us. And there is nothing but the cold, empty vacuum of space between us and another grain of sand in Rotorua. That's the next closest star. To truly build out our scale model of our Milky Way galaxy, we would need 100 billion grains of sand, and we would need to spread them out as far as from here to the moon times 3. Like 3 times the distance from here to the moon in order to truly get a scale model of our Milky Way galaxy. Now, I want to introduce you to one of my favourite, does that work? It doesn't. Betelgeuse. Betelgeuse, different people pronounce it differently, but this is my favourite star because Betelgeuse is a super massive red giant, meaning it's almost run out of its fuel and it's actually expanded, it's really big, and it is going to go supernova. Like it could go supernova any minute. By any minute on cosmological scales, that means it could be like 10,000 years away. But it could also be tonight. And if it went supernova tonight, it would be such a massive astronomical event. It would be one of the brightest objects in the sky. And a single pinprick, like everyone would know about it, it would be huge news. But Betelgeuse is 640 light years away. Now that's still quite close, but what is 640 light years from us? Again, in our scale model, our sun, our planet, Betelgeuse would be a boulder because it's not just a single grain of sand. It actually would be represented by a boulder because it's so big. But it would have to be 7,000 kilometres away to make our scale model. In other words, it would be in Singapore. And when we, an electron on the surface of a white blood cell, are looking up at the night sky, we are looking at a boulder in Singapore and going, oh, isn't that sweet? That's my favourite star. Like, I cannot even comprehend. This is going a bit flat. Whoops, there we go. Mind-blowing meme, right? This is just, like I say, it's incomprehensible. It's incomprehensible. And so, like I say, to actually build, this is the Andromeda galaxy, but say the Milky Way looks similar to this, to actually build out that scale model, where that's the sun, that's our planet, spreading these stars, let's say 100 billion grains of sand, that might be, just roughly thinking, maybe all the grains of sand from Mount Beach all the way down Papamoa. We dig up the entire beach, get 100 billion grains of sand, spread them out in this huge disk that's from here to 3 times further away than the moon. That's just our galaxy. There's another 100 billion other galaxies. Right? The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hand. This, when it was written by someone, living in a desert 5,000 years ago. It was true then. How much more true is it today? Because of what we understand through the tools of science. So whatever is the cause of the universe is powerful beyond comprehension. Absolutely beyond comprehension. But we have a cause that is spaceless, timeless, immaterial, supernatural, and immensely powerful. Now you can start to see this is starting to draw a picture of God, isn't it? But there's more, because the cause of the universe also has to itself be uncaused. Now, why is that? You might hear this question. This is a common question. If God made the universe, then who made God? It's a fair question. The problem is the question itself is a nonsensical question, because what effectively they're asking is, who made this unmade thing? This thing that was never made, who made it? It's like asking, what is the weight of the colour orange? It's like, well, colours don't have weight. It's a nonsensical question. So insert confused guy meme. It's like, you can't say who made God because God was not made. And if God was made, then you would just simply ask the question, well, who made the thing that made God? And then you'd have to ask, well, who made the thing that made the thing that made God? And then you get the idea, right? It's a nonsensical question that leads to all sorts of what we call recursive nonsense, infinite regression. Now, this isn't just convenient for us as Christians to say, no, God wasn't made, therefore he doesn't need a cause. This is actually recognised even by the ancient Greeks. Good old Aristotle lived 300 years before Christ, and he said he recognised something must be eternal. Something has to be eternal. Now remember, right up until the 1960s, the belief was it was the universe, that the universe has always existed. He didn't call it God, obviously. He called it the unmoved mover, or the prime mover. That is the first cause which itself is not caused. That is the thing that moves things without itself being moved. And of course, we're talking here about God. He recognised something has to be eternal. Something has to always have existed. Otherwise, you get this recursive, infinite regression problem. So, what do we have? We have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, supernatural, immensely powerful, and uncaused thing. But this is where it gets really interesting, because the cause of the universe also has to be a mind. A mind had to choose to create. Now, how do we know this? I've talked about cause and effect, right? Well, there's two different types of causes. Demonstrate it with falling dominoes. If we look at these, and I say, in a very technical sense, we pick domino number 3, and I say to you, what caused domino number 3 to fall? The domino number 2, right? What caused domino number 2 to fall? Number 1. But what caused domino number 1 to fall? It had to be a mind who chose to push it over. The very first cause had to be decided by an intelligent mind. Those dominoes are what we call event causation. They are caused by a prior event. And the vast majority of events that science looks at are this type of causation. But the very first one is what we call agent causation. Because if a mind did not freely choose, didn't desire to push that over, it would not have fallen. It takes a mind to trigger the first event. Other events can be triggered by prior events, but the very first event has to be a mind. Minds are conscious, they have wills, they have purpose. They're not just a cosmic force, they're not a law of nature. They're like you and I with a will, except in this case, this mind was also spaceless, timeless, immaterial, supernatural, immensely powerful, and uncaused and eternal. All the things that we aren't. So, what kind of mind was the cause of the universe? Well, it had to be an incredibly intelligent mind that had a purpose. And that purpose was life. How do we know that? Well, here we have a list of the laws and constants of the universe. There's actually about 40 of them. These are some of the more common ones, although there's ones on there that I'd never heard of until I researched this. But these are constants, and they're called constants because they are constant, right? They don't change. They are fixed laws of the universe. They haven't changed throughout history. They don't change across the universe. We know they're constant, and that's why we can do science, because that's so predictable, because these don't change. And if any of these were different to the value that they are, the strength that they are, the charge that they are, if they were just ever so slightly different, then life would not exist. It wouldn't be possible. So, for example, take the strength of gravity. If gravity was ever so slightly stronger, then in the first few million years of the Big Bang's expansion, everything would have clumped together and fallen into black holes, and there wouldn't be planets and stars. And if it was ever so slightly weaker, then the soup of hydrogen wouldn't have actually clumped together at all and formed planets and stars. So it has to be very precisely exactly what it is in order to produce the universe that we live in today. But that's just one of those constants. There's like 40 of them. So to demonstrate this idea, I want you to imagine a universe-generating machine, a machine that makes universes. And on this machine, we have 40 dials, and each of these dials represents one of these constants, one of these laws of nature. And you can create any universe you want. You can set any dial to any value, and you push a button, and out pops a universe. The problem is that we have these green, what we call life-permitting ranges, and we have to dial each of these into that range in order to produce a universe that produces life. But it's not just it's not just the majority, it's every single one of these dials has to be set on that within that life-permitting range to produce a universe that can support life. And you move a single one, just one of those dials, just outside of that green range, and you get a universe that cannot support life. But here's where it gets interesting. Those life-permitting ranges, the more we understand about science, the narrower and narrower and narrower they actually get, our understanding of just how precise those dials have to be. To the extent that when it comes to gravity, they've calculated that if the strength of gravity is slightly stronger or slightly weaker, to a degree of a number that has 60 zeros in it. It's got 60 zeros. If we had gravity, you imagine a number with 60 zeros and you go +1, it's too strong, life won't exist. -1, it's too weak, life can't exist. It has to be that precise to produce the universe that can support life. And all these other dials are similar. The life-permitting ranges are unbelievably narrow. And so what are we to conclude? I say we conclude that someone, an intelligent mind that actually set these dials, wanted a universe that supported life. Because if you just moved them ever so slightly, we wouldn't have a universe that supported life. In other words, the Creator had a purpose. Now, there's a famous atheistic philosopher called Anthony Flew who's since passed away, but he spent his entire life as an atheistic philosopher trying to disprove the existence of God. And yet, when he came across this argument in the final few years of his life, and he went deep into this, he came to the same conclusion. He said, there must be a God. There's no other way you can explain the fine-tuning of the universe. Now, he didn't believe in the Christian God, but he did believe in a God, and a lot of his colleagues ridiculed him in his final years. They said, oh, he's gone mad. Because he was suddenly saying, I've been wrong my whole life. There must be a God, because this cannot be explained without this idea that there's a purpose behind the universe. So, we have a spaceless, timeless, immaterial, immensely powerful, uncaused, eternal, intelligent, purposeful mind. Now, does that sound like God? Now, it's not the Christian God. It's not a complete picture anyway of the Christian God, right? But it is a divine creator. And we've come to this conclusion using the tools of science. And in fact, you could sum up this whole this argument. You could say the cause of the universe is an unimaginably powerful supernatural mind that created a finely tuned universe so that life could exist, so that we could exist. And in fact, the more we learn from science, the more it points to not just the possibility of God, but the necessity of God. Remember I said that, war didn't explain that picture of a tsunami because, yes, war causes destruction, but it's not a full picture. It's almost like a divine creator is the only thing that provides an answer that actually encapsulates the full picture of what we see through science. Professor John Lennox is a great mathematician at Oxford University. He puts it so well. He says, the more we get to know about our universe through science, the more the hypothesis that there is a creator gains in credibility as the best explanation of why we're here. In other words, science is pushing us closer and closer and closer, giving us more and more assurance that what we believe, the fact that there is a creator God, is in fact true. Science is revealing that to us. So, you have to ask the question then, why don't more scientists come to this conclusion? Right? I think it's a good question, and I think it's an important question because typically most scientists, not all of them, there's plenty of amazing, very respected scientists who are theists and who are Christians, but most scientists have an atheistic view of the world. And I'm going to make a pretty bold claim. I'm going to say it's because science has been hijacked. Now that's a bold claim, but I want to explain what I mean by that, and I'm going to use a story to demonstrate it, a story of a crime scene. So bear with me. I want you to imagine this story is taking place in the southern states of the US back in the 50s and 60s when open racism was absolutely rampant. So imagine a police chief inspector has arrived on the scene of a brutal crime. It's a murder. There is a body and it has been brutally bashed to death. It's a gruesome scene. The scene is cordoned off and there's a team of investigators who are investigating this brutal crime. The inspector calls together his team of investigators for a briefing and asks them to present the evidence they've collected so far. But before they present the evidence, he says to his team, remember, whites don't commit crimes like this. Only a black man would be this brutal. So the evidence starts coming in. One investigator reports an eyewitness account seeing this a white man leaving the scene. The chief concludes, well, if he was white, it won't be him. Another investigator reports another eyewitness seeing this man who was leaving the scene was holding a baseball bat covered in blood. Well, there must be another explanation for that, he said. We all know a white man couldn't have done this. Yet another investigator reports the victim was seen having a heated argument with this white man in the streets only hours earlier. Again, the chief says, this line of evidence is a dead end. Keep looking for the black man who committed this crime. Now, I think you all see the problem, right? The problem is the investigator has arrived on the scene with a predetermined worldview that automatically excludes possible answers. It's possible a white man did commit that crime, but he's arrived on the scene with this worldview that excludes that as a possible answer, and therefore he has started his investigation with a set of conclusions that are simply not allowed. So what's happened in this case is a crime investigation should be find the guilty person. But in this case, it's become find the guilty black person, right? That's what it's become. And the same thing has happened in science. You see, when science first came about, science was the search for the right answer. But what's happened in modern day science now, it's been hijacked by a worldview called naturalism or materialism that simply says supernatural causes are not allowed. Find the right natural answer. Instead of just find the truth, wherever that might lead you, the evidence, you have to find a natural answer to the question. In the same way that white person is forbidden as an answer in our racist story, God is forbidden as an answer in modern science today because God is supernatural. So when we look at the effect, and I conclude God is the only cause that is sufficient to produce this effect, my atheist friend says, hang on, that's not science. You can't invoke a supernatural cause. And they back up that belief by saying something that's actually quite true. They say, you can't invoke God as the cause because you can't examine God with the tools of science. And that's true, isn't it? But here's the thing. You can examine the cause. You can examine the effect and reason back to God. You see, when my kids were young, they would say to me, Daddy, why is God not visible? Why is he invisible? How do we know he's real if we can't see him? And I'd use the analogy of the wind. I'd say, can you see the wind? And they'd say, well, we see the trees blowing. I said, no, you're seeing the trees. I said, can you actually see the wind that are pushing the trees? Well, no, you can't see the wind, can you? But it makes no sense to say wind doesn't exist because what you can see is the effect of the wind. It makes perfect sense to a child, and it's exactly the same thing. No, you can't see God with the tools of science, but you most certainly can see the effect of God using the tools of science. And so to say God doesn't exist simply because we can't measure him is actually invalid, and it only comes about because science has been hijacked by this naturalistic worldview that says you're not allowed to use a supernatural cause. And this is kind of the result. And I wonder if maybe my atheist friend doesn't like my conclusions that God did it, not because I'm not doing science, but because maybe the idea of a God is kind of frightening. Because if God exists, then maybe I'll have to answer to him one day. What a terrifying thought that is, without Jesus. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the skies proclaim the work of his hands. And the heavens tell us quite conclusively that God exists. And we can know this with science, with an incredible degree of confidence, if science is the honest search for the truth rather than just the right kind of truth. And of course, I've barely even scratched the surface of the amount of evidence and the different ways that you can examine the evidence. Think about like the theory of intelligent design is this entire theory that points to all of the ways that the fingerprints of God's creation exist in the biological world. It's absolutely incredible, and it points to the existence of God. Certainly points to the necessity of God to create the first life. Like, I don't believe that evolution has the creative power that it claims to have to create the diversity of life. But even if you grant that evolution can explain the diversity of life, what about the very first life? Evolution requires a self-replicating organism to operate. Where did the first self-replicating organism come from? No one can answer that. But we can, if we invoke a supernatural God that actually injected life into his creation. There's also all of these fields of philosophy that have incredibly powerful and intricate arguments. There's theories from ethics, there's metaphysics, there's epistemology, and there's all these amazing fields in philosophy that point to God. Think about people who study the human body. Right? You don't even have to dig very deep when you look at the incredible design of the human body and the systems and processes, biological and physical, that happen in our bodies. It's absolutely awe-inspiring. And those of us who allow a supernatural creator to be a part of that are just awestruck by his power when we examine that. And of course, I haven't even mentioned all of the evidence there is of Jesus Christ, who is the embodiment, the human incarnation of the incredible, powerful creator that I've argued for this morning, who went well beyond science to walk and suffer with us, and then paid the ultimate price to then prove he had authority over sin and death and rise again. So if today is the day that you feel that you need to submit to him as your Lord, acknowledge him as your creator, confess to him as your judge, and then accept forgiveness and grace that only a good Father offers. And I invite you to respond today. I'd love to pray with you, answer questions. There's a prayer team that's always available after a service. So come and talk to us. Because there are so many reasons to believe in God and to trust him. Amen.